All right, so today we're taking a deep dive into what truly makes a school successful. And trust me, it goes way beyond just like test scores or, impressive facilities. We're talking about leadership and management, the stuff that really shapes a school's culture, the stuff that determines whether teachers and students thrive. And we're drawing insights from this document pasted text. One thing that really stood out to me was this idea of bringing in outside experts, these, what are they called? School improvement advocates during the accreditation process. They seem to have a knack for spotting those hidden problems that internal staff might miss. What are your thoughts on that?
It's really interesting because schools often develop a sort of tunnel vision. They're so focused on their own routines that they might not see areas where they could improve. So bringing in these advocates, who are often experienced educators themselves, it's like having a fresh pair of eyes on the situation. They can provide an unbiased perspective and point out things that the school might be missing.
So it's like having a consultant come in and say, okay, let's look at what's really going on. But in this case, it seems like these advocates are more focused on finding real solutions, not just trying to please the school owners, right?
Absolutely. The text emphasizes that these advocates use evidence-based practices. They're not there to just rubber stamp the school's existing methods. They come in with this wealth of knowledge about what actually works and what doesn't. And they're not afraid to challenge the school if they see something that needs to change.
I bet that can be tough for some school leaders, having someone come in and critique them.
It can be, but if a school wants to improve, they need to be open to that feedback.
Yeah.
And the text makes it clear that these advocates aren't trying to be mean. They're trying to help.
Makes sense. Now, the text also talks about some pretty, let's say, uninspiring leadership styles. It describes what it calls authoritarian leadership. And honestly, it doesn't sound like a fun place to work.
No, it really doesn't. And this is where we start to see the real human impact of bad leadership. This kind of top-down, command and control style creates a toxic environment. It leads to stress, burnout, and it really hurts the quality of education.
So it's not just about the principal being a grump, it actually has real consequences.
Yeah, exactly. If you're constantly being micromanaged or criticized, it's hard to do your best work. And for teachers, that means their students suffer too.
There's a point in the text that I found really interesting. It suggests that some school leaders actually try to justify their bad behavior by saying it's just their personal style. Like, come on.
Yeah, that's where the text pushes us to think critically about leadership. Education isn't just a free-for-all where anything goes.
Hmm.
There are best practices, ethical guidelines, a whole body of research about effective leadership. Saying it's just my style isn't an excuse for doing things that harm teachers and students.
It's like a surgeon saying, well, this is just how I operate. It just wouldn't fly. So what's the alternative? If that my way or the highway approach is so bad, what does good leadership actually look like in a school?
That's a great question, and the text really explores it in depth. It emphasizes creating a supportive and collaborative environment where teachers feel valued and where they feel respected and empowered to share their ideas.
So it's not about the leader being the boss. It's more about being a facilitator or a guide.
That's a good way to put it.
Hmm.
Good school leaders create a sense of shared responsibility. They let their staff take initiative, make decisions, and help shape the school's culture.
Right, because people are more invested when they feel like they have a voice.
Exactly. And when you create that environment, it benefits everyone. Teachers feel supported, students feel engaged, and everyone benefits.
I'm starting to see how this connects to teacher resilience, which the text mentions a lot. It seems like a supportive leadership style is key to creating a workplace where teachers can thrive.
Absolutely. The text identifies 7 key factors that contribute to teacher resilience. And they all come from creating a work environment where teachers feel valued and empowered.
Okay, let's break those down. I'm really curious to hear what those 7 factors are and how they actually work in a real school. What's the first one?
Well, the first factor is having a supportive workplace that encourages teamwork. So you need to create a culture where teachers feel comfortable sharing ideas, where they feel comfortable asking for help and learning from each other. It's about breaking down those walls that can sometimes exist in schools and encouraging everyone to work together for student success.
That's crucial. Teachers shouldn't feel like they're all alone, struggling on their own.
Right, they need to feel like you're part of a team, working together with a shared mission.
What's the next factor?
Next is fair compensation. It might seem obvious, but it's often overlooked. Teachers need to earn a living wage that lets them focus on their work. They shouldn't be stressed about paying their bills, because when teachers are stressed about money, it affects their teaching.
That's so important. It's about recognizing the value of teachers and paying them fairly. What about the third factor?
The third factor is stress mitigation. So it's about taking steps to address the things that cause stress in schools, like streamlining tasks, communicating clearly, or providing resources for managing workload.
So it's not just telling teachers to manage their stress, it's about actually reducing stress.
Right. It's about being aware of the demands on teachers
Ah,
and making their jobs more manageable.
that makes sense. What's next?
Next is work-life balance. Teachers are people too. They need time to recharge and take care of their personal lives. Working late every night just isn't sustainable in the long run.
So it's about respecting boundaries and recognizing that teachers have lives outside of school.
Exactly. It's about encouraging healthy work habits and making sure teachers have time and energy for both their personal and professional lives.
That makes a lot of sense. What about factor number 5?
Number 5 is having enough classroom supplies and teaching aids. It's hard for teachers to do their best if they're always scrambling for materials, or if they're stuck with outdated resources.
It seems like a no-brainer, but I know a lot of teachers struggle to get the resources they need.
You're right, schools need to provide teachers with the tools they need to be effective. It's not just about textbooks and pencils. It's also about technology, professional development, and other resources that help them teach well.
Okay, 2 more factors to go. What's next?
The sixth factor is recognizing the dignity and self-esteem of teachers. This goes back to what we talked about earlier about respecting teachers as professionals. They need to feel valued and appreciated, not just by their students and families, but also by their school leaders and the community.
It's not just about a Teacher Appreciation Week. It's about building a culture of respect that's woven into the school.
Exactly. It's about creating a place where teachers feel seen, heard, and valued for their work.
And finally, what's the 7th factor?
The seventh is continuous professional development. This means providing teachers with ongoing training, mentorship, and chances to grow.
So it's not just about initial teacher training, it's about supporting them throughout their careers.
Exactly. Investing in teachers' growth shows them that they're valued. It helps them stay motivated, challenged, and connected to their work.
This is all really fascinating. I'm realizing that building teacher resilience isn't just about perks or making teachers feel good. It's about a systemic approach that addresses their needs on multiple levels.
You got it. It's about creating a system of support that helps teachers thrive in their profession. And the text is very clear. When teachers are thriving, students are thriving. It's all connected.
That makes perfect sense. And I think this leads us perfectly into one of the most interesting points from the text. This idea that a leader's sense of justice is absolutely crucial for a school to be successful.
Absolutely. That's where things get really interesting and where we can see how a leader's actions affect the whole school community.
All right, I'm hooked. Let's dive into that in the next part of our deep dive.
So we were talking about this idea of a leader's sense of justice being so important for a school to really succeed. It really resonated with me as I was reading this text.
Yeah, me too. It seems like it goes beyond just being fair or something. What does it actually mean for a school leader to have that strong sense of justice?
It's about creating a culture where everyone's held accountable and where things are fair for everyone, from the principal to the teachers to the students. It means that decisions are made in a way that everyone understands. Rules are applied consistently, and everyone's held to the same standards.
So it's not about like playing favorites or letting things slide for certain people.
Exactly. A leader with a strong sense of justice doesn't let their personal feelings get in the way. They make decisions based on what's right for the school as a whole, even if it means making tough choices that not everyone will like.
I bet that's hard. There must be a lot of pressure to keep everyone happy.
There is, but true leadership isn't about being popular. It's about doing the right thing, even when it's difficult. And that kind of integrity earns respect and creates trust for everyone.
I see how that connects back to teacher resilience. If teachers feel like the system is fair and they can trust their leaders, they're probably less stressed and more likely to stay at the school.
Absolutely. When teachers feel like they're working in a just environment, they feel more valued and supported. And that makes them more likely to be happy and engaged in their work.
The text also talks about distributed leadership, which seems to go along with this idea of justice. What exactly does that mean?
Distributed leadership is about moving away from that traditional top-down model.
Yeah.
Where the principal makes all the calls. It's about giving teachers more leadership roles,
Mm.
letting them share their expertise and contribute to making decisions.
So it's about sharing responsibility and recognizing that teachers have valuable insights.
Exactly. Teachers are the ones working directly with students every day. They really understand what's happening in the classrooms and what students need.
Right. It seems like you'd be missing out if you didn't tap into that knowledge.
Exactly. And when teachers feel like their voices are heard and their ideas matter, they're more invested in the school's success.
I bet that creates a much more collaborative environment, but it must also require a lot of trust from the principal, right? They have to be willing to give up some control.
You're absolutely right. Distributed leadership requires a leader who is comfortable sharing power. It's about recognizing that you don't have all the answers, and that the best solutions often come from working together.
That sounds like a big shift for some principals who might be used to being in charge.
It can be, but the text argues that this approach is really effective. When you empower teachers to be leaders, you unleash their creativity and passion, and that ultimately benefits everyone.
Okay, I'm convinced. But let's be real for a second. We've talked about all these ideals, but I'm sure there are lots of challenges that school leaders face when they try to do these things. What are some of the biggest roadblocks they run into?
Well, one of the most common challenges is resistance to change. Schools can be very traditional, and people often don't want to do things differently.
The "we've always done it this way" mentality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that can be frustrating for leaders who are trying to make positive changes.
So how do they overcome that resistance? How do they get people on board with change?
It takes strong communication, a clear vision, and a lot of patience. Leaders need to explain why change is necessary and address people's concerns, and do it in a way that shows respect and empathy.
So it's not about just giving orders, it's about building relationships, creating trust, and getting everyone involved.
Exactly. It's about bringing everyone along and making them feel like they're part of the process.
That sounds much more effective. But I imagine there are also challenges with resources, right? Schools are often underfunded and understaffed.
That's definitely a major factor. Limited resources make it hard to implement new initiatives and to provide teachers with the support they need.
So what can leaders do about that? Do they just have to give up and say they can't do anything?
Not at all. It takes creativity and a willingness to think outside the box.
So it's about being smart with the resources they have and finding new ways to do things.
Exactly. It might mean looking for grants, partnering with community organizations, or just being more efficient with what they already have.
I like that approach. Don't let limited resources stop you from making things better.
Exactly. There's always something you can do.
You know, being a school leader is a tough job. It's demanding and stressful, and sometimes people don't appreciate it. But I bet there are also some amazing rewards. What are some of the things that make it all worth it?
For me, the best part is seeing the positive impact you're having on both teachers and
It's
students.
about making a difference, right?
Exactly. Knowing that you're helping to shape the next generation is incredibly rewarding. And when you see teachers feeling supported and students thriving, it makes all the challenges worth it.
I can imagine. There must also be a lot of satisfaction in building a strong team.
Absolutely. There's nothing better than seeing a group of talented people work together towards a common goal. And when you can create a culture of collaboration and respect, it creates a real sense of community.
It sounds like the rewards of school leadership are really personal and meaningful.
They are. It's not the right job for everyone, but for those who are passionate about it, it can be incredibly fulfilling.
Now, before we wrap up, I wanted to mention something we talked about earlier, continuous learning for teachers. But what about school leaders? How do they stay sharp and keep learning and growing?
That's a great question, and I think it's just as important for school leaders to keep learning as it is for teachers.
So it's not just about going to workshops or conferences, it's about a mindset of constantly wanting to learn and improve.
Exactly. It might involve reading articles, connecting with other leaders, or even taking classes.
So it's about staying curious, being open to new ideas, and always trying to get better.
Precisely. The best school leaders are the ones who never stop learning.
That's a great point, and I think it's the perfect way to transition into the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore some specific strategies and resources that school leaders can use to keep learning and create amazing school environments for everyone. So we're back, diving deeper into this fascinating world of school leadership. And, you know, one of the things that's really struck me is how much this text emphasizes the leader's personal qualities. It's not just about managing stuff, it's about their sense of justice, their willingness to share power, their commitment to learning.
It's so true. It's not just about skills. It's about a way of being. It's about those values and principles that make people trust you and want to work with you.
Absolutely. And speaking of trust, the text brings up this idea of biased leadership practices, something that often comes to light during these international accreditation visits. Can you explain what that means and why it seems to be such a common issue?
It's fascinating, isn't it? And I think a lot of school leaders might not even realize they're doing it. It's not always intentional discrimination. It's more about having a limited perspective, like you're in a bubble and you don't even see it.
Like an echo chamber, you only hear your own ideas bouncing back at you.
Exactly. And that leads to all sorts of problems, from outdated teaching methods to biases in hiring.
So these international accreditations force schools to look outside that bubble and compare themselves to global standards.
Right. It's like holding up a mirror and saying, okay, how do you stack up?
Hmm.
And it can be a real wake-up call for some.
But it's a good thing, right? A chance to learn and grow.
Absolutely. The text really stresses that it's not about punishing schools, it's about helping them improve.
And that's where those school improvement advocates come in. They're like mentors who guide the school through this process.
Exactly. They bring that outside perspective, fresh eyes, and they can offer practical advice and support.
This all really highlights the need for humility in leadership. It's not about being perfect. It's about being open to feedback and always learning.
Couldn't agree more. The best leaders are the ones who are always questioning themselves, always trying to learn.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some key takeaways you hope our listeners will remember?
For me, it's that school leadership is about so much more than just managing things. It's about shaping lives, building a culture of learning, and helping everyone reach their potential.
It's inspiring, isn't it? It's about building trust, creating a community.
Absolutely. And if I could leave our listeners with one last thought, it would be to never underestimate your own power to make a difference, no matter what your role is. Whether you're a principal, a teacher, a parent, we can all contribute to positive change.
That's a great message. Leadership is a choice we make every day. Well, this has been a truly insightful conversation. Thank you so much for joining me.
It was my pleasure. And to our listeners, keep thinking about these ideas and find ways to make a positive impact in your own school communities, because the future of education depends on all of us.